they'll use the English translation of Shincheonji, which is New Heaven, New Earth. And so most people in the States wouldn't recognize that like on a pamphlet, right? New Heaven, New Earth just seems like, no, New Heaven, New Earth. But that's the English translation of Shincheonji, the title. And so they say they're, open evangelizing here and there, but we know the truth of like how people end up in these groups. I mean, it's kind of the same across the board for most of them. I think World Mission Society is the one that's kind of more like we're Mother God, and if you don't have any kind of context about Mother God, you're kind of lost, and you're just listening to what they're, because I've been approached by them multiple times too, and so whereas with Shincheonji, or what we would refer to it as like SCJ, is not very forthcoming about who they are. And that's the part where I would always say, like, Jesus was never like, just follow me for a couple of months, then I'll tell you who I am. Like, he was never just like, just see what happens, like, come along. It was never like that. He was, and they would use things like, oh, he said like, my time hasn't come. And it's been like 30 something years for SCJ. So I'm like, how long is it like before you actually say, and they said,
the bread's going stale here.
Yes. So they're like, he's using wisdom to hide, like, and I'm like, but he was never telling the disciples to just follow along and then see later on what happens, which is what happens in SCJ, where you join and it's months later that you might even find out who they really are. So,
right.
Yeah.
And they can, I mean, they are known, Shincheonji, for like infiltrating churches and concealing their identity. I'm sure in many cases just, blatantly lying and being deceptive and coercive and trying to get people to join. And there's a verse in, I think it's 1st or 2nd Corinthians, where Paul talks about like, we did not use underhanded ways when we brought the gospel, but he talks about how like by an open proclamation of the truth, like we were just wide open. We weren't using manipulative tactics to try to like trick you into doing something. We fully disclosed it and then let you make a decision based on what the information was.
Right.
And once again, the fact that they have to sort of conceal it and then this goes really back to their concern, which is so much more for the outward appearance than the inward. They want to just make sure they look good, because they're not interested in your well-being or the well-being of those who are trying to get in. They're just interested in, bolstering their own purposes. And so it doesn't matter if they have to lie a little bit, because they're not concerned with what is actually going on in their hearts. They're not concerned that they are dead men's bones on the inside and whitewashed tombs on the outside. That they don't acknowledge that, obviously, but that's clearly the case.
And I think mainstream church, just like in general, that's something to be really wary of, especially in the DMV. There are some bigger churches like McLean Bible, NCC. Like there's so many of those where they would, prior to at least COVID, they would go to these churches, sit next to people, talk to them like they're just visiting the church, to get them to come, to these events where they would host it. And it seems just like a normal church that's just hosting a worship night, but in reality, obviously, it's a recruitment event. I think that's another thing that once I left, I really, as many people I interacted with in church and pastors and leaders, I would just say, like, don't undermine this. Like, there's about 400 something of them in the DMV, and that's in about 5 years, right? That's a lot of people to have accumulated. And these people are belonging to churches, wanting to be discipled, wanting to be approached, spoken to, and like, when Jesus was warning us in scripture, it wasn't like this, it's going to happen eventually. It's happening right now, where he talks about, they'll say that I'm here and there and over there, but don't believe them. Like, these are the organizations that are literally like, Jesus is back, which is funny because they twist that in those organizations and say, like, in SCJ, they would teach that these churches say that Jesus is here, but like, they're the ones that are actually saying he's back, like he's returned. And this
Mm-hmm.
is real. Like, it's really happening right now with these
Mm-hmm.
organizations, and they're amassing people not because they have the truth, but just because they may do certain things better than some other churches. And they always do this where they compare the best of themselves to the worst of certain churches, right? To paint this image that they've got the truth, and that's why they're
Right.
ultimately, you know. But yeah, I think it's
Narcissism once
absolutely
again.
classic. And so,
Mm-hmm.
it's something to be really wary about, and to know and to just look out for each other in general with these kind of things. There's people who have left since I left. Some who I knew, some who I helped, which was a really gratifying experience, just because yeah, ultimately it's really sad and unfortunate that people are kind of in these groups, but
Mm-hmm.
just creating awareness, letting people know churches need to be openly talking about this, like what to
Yeah.
look out for, Um, so yeah, so
Yeah. It's like if we become aware, I mean, COVID, well, there's an example. If you become aware that there's this new,
yeah,
infection disease that is beginning to spread, you don't just say, oh, well, that's interesting that's happening to those people over there. It's like,
hmm
well, no, this is something that very likely will impact you. And so you need to know, okay,
yeah,
what are the signs? What are the symptoms? What's the, what can we do to prepare people who will very likely, there are going to be people in churches that will encounter these people, and it
absolutely,
is it is
yeah,
like an infection where if you're not aware of what they are, if you don't have sort of some basic information about these groups, you are going to be so much more likely to catch the disease, to be infected by it. And so um, yeah, I think I so agree with what you're saying. There's an, churches need to have like their booster shots,
yes,
before having this thing, you know, before your church or people encounter it, they need to have this like preemptive sort of barriers put up so that you have some sense of being able to identify what this is, because these groups, they thrive on manipulation. It's easy to hear these things and be like, oh, well, that's just some strange wacky cult, who would ever believe that? But it's like,
Mhm.
Reddy is a very intelligent person. This isn't just for the night. This is something that they thrive on, being very, very good at manipulation and taking information and making it seem
Yeah,
convincing. And anybody can get swept up in
yeah,
this if they don't have some kind of preparation for it. And so, yeah, I don't
absolutely.
know what that should look like, but I do totally agree that in some way, especially knowing that in the U.S. right now and probably other places, there is a focused effort by this group to infiltrate Christian churches, to
Yes.
draw out members. And so
Mhm.
it's something that, yeah, pastors, I would hope, would be thinking through what could
Yes.
be done to make people aware
Where
of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely agree. I think it's needed, it's necessary, and I think the dangers of someone joining a group like this just is it's not worth ignoring. Honestly, it's yeah. I think when I left, I remember being like why isn't this like headlining in like churches and like mainstream churches? Like why aren't they talking about this? Like I think yeah, you realize after experiencing something like that that it's very dangerous, and people as we speak are probably being recruited through Instagram, and like because they'll follow what the churches follow, and then they'll find and then they'll message you and you think, oh, this person just wants to be friends, and that's not the
Mm-hmm.
case.
Mm-hmm.
They'll use dating apps like Bumble
Yep.
to they use the friends feature to kind of filter people. There was a whole chat at one point of people just posting pictures of the person they're talking to so that people don't overlap chatting with them. But the amount of information they retain from these people, it's and then it's kind of just put on these chats so that they can become targets. It's actually really scary, honestly. I
Yeah.
remember just thinking like this is terrifying to be like, oh, this person has depression, this person has anxiety, she's 26, this is her name, and do you know what I mean? And it's like very obvious here what's going on. And so I think it's important to really, get the word out there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might seem like just this sort of fringe, far off, distant thing that we're talking about here, and maybe it is until you realize, oh, my daughter is in
Yes.
this group, and now
Mhm.
she's not coming to visit anymore. Oh,
Yes.
my husband got caught up in this, and now there's a possibility we're going to be divorced, and
Yeah.
he's trying to manipulate my kids into this. It's like this is it might seem trivial until it's your family, and I think
Yes.
both of us, obviously you being in it. Sorry about that. I,
That's okay.
I've I've seen enough. I've seen enough families just literally ripped apart by these groups to
Mhm.
know that it can't. I guess it can't be emphasized enough that this is something that there should be in some way some awareness
Yep.
of. And
Yep.
so hopefully we got that point across there.
Yes.
But